What I noticed in big corporations, and I spent most of my time in Kodak, so it was pretty typical of a big organization. And what I noticed is innovators were celebrated, but not empowered.
In the workplace, why should business leaders allow for experimentation and inventing?
Well, I would say the business leaders, that is, if you're leading some sort of corporate entity or something, not only should you allow it, you should encourage it, because what do you think your competition is doing? They're exactly doing it. Especially if you're successful. If you're very successful, people see that and they'll say, how can I get that success? How can I, get in there and get a piece of that action? And basically, that's through doing something different. And so, quite frankly, it's the lifeblood of the future of a company. And so most companies, they'll basically say they really like experimentation, they like innovation, until it happens to them. And then it becomes, a challenge to them rather than an opportunity. And I think that's the danger sometimes that people face. But you should definitely encourage that in your organization and discuss it and make it part of your everyday, not an unusual thing. Mm-hmm. It should be part of the everyday discussions about what's new today, what's new coming. And it doesn't have to come from a research laboratory. Mm-hmm. Or, it can come from a marketing organization or a business organization or any part of your organization. It's basically people challenging the established processes in order to see something new or to get some new opportunity. And you'll see a lot of failures. You got to basically celebrate the failures a little bit. Say, listen, we didn't succeed here, but we did learn the following. Mm. And that's a success. So I think we have to make innovation and experimentation more an everyday, ordinary thing, as opposed to some exceptional event that gets celebrated once a year somewhere.
How can businesses create a culture of creativity and innovation?
Well, I think that's a hard thing to do sometimes, because innovation is a little bit less time sensitive, certainly less predictable than we all like to be with our established organization and processes. But you have to encourage it as a I don't know. What I noticed in big corporations, and I spent most of my time in Kodak, so it was pretty typical of a big organization. And what I noticed is innovators were celebrated, but not empowered. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you would recognize someone who made an invention or got a patent or innovated a new process, a business process, or a marketing idea or something. But then they weren't really empowered to carry it more through sometimes. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe the innovators don't want to carry it through, but a lot of them do, or they want to be part of the success as it goes forward. They like to see their baby mature, and so I think you have to, as an organization, create an environment that allows people to live with their idea and grow with their idea. One, it makes them better inventors. And to be honest with you, the best inventors are the ones that live through the development of their idea and see all of the difficulties and failures that are largely unanticipated in their initial idea. And then when they go back and start thinking about derivatives of that idea or other inventions, they're a lot more wise, I guess, in terms of consideration. And so they make better suggestions, or they do more research on relevant topics before they present their idea. They become more sophisticated inventors, more realistic inventors. So encouraging them to be able to do that is something I think that we tend not to do. We tend to try to keep, the inventors in a box. These are the crazy people in the corner. They come up with the idea spit out, and then we'll take it from here, and I don't think that helps the inventor. And I also don't think it helps the organization, because then the inventors are seen as some sort of an odd species as opposed to everybody. And everybody can invent things. You don't have to be some wild-eyed guy that has crazy hair and dresses weird. You can be anybody to innovate, But innovators all face the same challenge. How do I get people to absorb a new idea and to act on it? And how do we get it to mature? So organizations, their job is to do that.
Having disrupted the photography industry with your digital camera, why should businesses strive to disrupt their own markets?
I will tell you that the disruption of the digital photography was an activity that occupied me and a number of people at Kodak for well over 3 decades before it happened. Okay, so it took a long time. Okay, so we wrestled with this question a lot. Okay, and so it's hard to boil down the answer to this question. But the reason you want to disrupt your business is because, first of all of your competitors want to disrupt your business. They want what you have. I'm assuming you're successful. Eastman Kodak was an extremely successful company for over 100 years, okay? And so anybody would envy the position of a company like that. So when you envy, you want to be like, and you want to get there, and so therefore you want to go and do this. And they're going to look for changes. Now, the world doesn't stand still, no matter how much we would like it to stand still. It doesn't, because of all of these hungry people out there, hungry organizations. In the case of photography, it was a technological revolution or discontinuity that took place. Silicon technology and light and digital technology sort of came together and offered another pathway. And by the way, that pathway was well known and practiced by a whole bunch of other companies that never considered photography as part of their business. You know, the Sony Corporation wasn't considered a photographic company back in 1980 when they proposed Mavica, for example. So they look for new opportunities, just like in your company, you would look for new opportunities. That's what they're doing. So you have to constantly be thinking about how you can disrupt, how your business could be disrupted and how you can anticipate that. You know, the old expression, only the paranoid survive, I think is very apt. I don't know if you have to be paranoid. You know, in the case of Kodak, I think a little bit more paranoia would have been helpful, but it would have been pretty trying to exist in a paranoid state for 30 years. But clearly, there's opportunities that other people see. So you should do that and be the devil's advocate and try to disrupt your business and have real honest conversations and empower the change agents within your organization to make powerful arguments. Lots of times a change agent comes in and says, hey, we could do it differently. And they'll say, yeah, well, we don't want to do it this way, that way, the other way. I had that argument for many decades with inside of Kodak. You know, why would anybody want to look at their picture on a television set? Prints, people love prints. People have been doing prints for 100 years. What data do you have that says that they don't want prints? Okay, but empower the guy to say, well, what if? You know, and you do sort of what ifs. And what I find is if you can get an argument to the establishment of, okay, well, tell me the 2 or 3 things that would change your mind about this. If this was developed, if that was developed, if the cost of this got down to that point, then I would consider it. Then you get down to the specific breakthroughs that they feel might change their mind. And by the way, those breakthroughs probably won't come from anywhere you can predict. They'll come from a totally different industry many times. Now, in the case of photography, a lot of that came from a lot of different areas. Nobody predicted the business model associated with social networking. I can guarantee you that was not discussed in 1990s within Kodak. We started thinking about online presence, but we thought about it in the context of the world we knew. We wanted to sell prints. So we said, well, we'll do an online presence and people will send their pictures in and we'll make prints and we'll send it back to them. And that's the online presence. So we were doing online before anybody else, but we weren't thinking about the business model at all. So you've got to empower people who think differently and give them a chance to have really valid arguments. And then I would say the innovators try to get your argument down to a few developments that if they happened, even though they might seem bizarre at the time or distant. Okay, if this happened, you've isolated it down now to a couple of 10 posts that if they happen, I'll react. And then all of a sudden, people start to think more realistically about it. It's hard to change people's mind.
What first inspired your invention of the self-contained digital camera?
I think at my university, I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I got interested in how light affected silicon. I did a master's project in that. And it was just sort of a romantic vision. I could control electronics with light. I just thought that was a very cool thing. I was also brought up in the period where Star Trek was. And I like to say that all good ideas come from Star Trek, right? So when I saw Star Trek, the idea of modern to me, or future, didn't have to do with paper. You never saw a piece of paper on the bridge of the Enterprise, right? So when I went to Kodak, I took a lot of photographic courses because that was typical of engineers. And I was an electrical engineer, which was a relatively new breed of new hires there. We largely did mechanical engineering because cameras were largely mechanical marvels and stuff. And so you had to load the film, and then you had to take the film out and develop it, and then you had to print it on the paper, and none of that seemed cool to me at all. And so I combined this past experience of light affecting silicon, the development of the charge coupled device, and a practical device became available in 1974. And then I had learned about digital technology in my first couple of years at Kodak. And I combined them all into this idea of what I called an electronic camera. I didn't call it a digital camera for reasons that I'll get into later, but I called it an electronic camera because I was thinking, could I build a camera that didn't use any consumables? In fact, the only thing that was consumed in taking a picture was a few joules of energy. So I wasn't buying film and using chemicals and printing on paper. All I did was using energy. It fit with my Star Trek mentality, I think. I wanted to build it with no moving parts. That was just me being from Brooklyn and wanting to annoy all the mechanical engineers, I think, that were near me. But the idea of no moving parts seemed elegant to me. Okay? So no moving parts, no consumables. Could I take pictures this way? And the CCD allowed me to look at that. I used digital technology basically to freeze time, because if you could digitize it, you could store it. If you could store it, you didn't have to have any mechanical moving parts like a helical scan mechanism. And so I used a completely digital approach to apply it to photography. So that was really the genesis of it. I had no idea if I could do it. It was just a dream. I thought I'd try to do it. And luckily, I was working for a supervisor who was very patient with this crazy idea. It took about a year or so working in a back laboratory. And we didn't see any pictures for the whole year we worked on it. We only saw oscilloscope traces, voltage measurements, and things like that. It wasn't until early December of 1975 that both the playback unit, which was a key part of this, which doesn't get discussed much, and the camera itself were complete enough so that we could actually take a picture, give it to the playback unit, and actually see it on the screen. That was in December of 1975. And then when it actually worked, I was very happy. My supervisor didn't even know I was building a portable camera. I mean, that's how little conversation. We would meet and talk as a routine, in terms of supervisor to engineer on every other week or so. And I would tell him what was going on with the camera. And he said, that's cool. That's a good idea, But there were no formal reports. There was no budget. I was just me, that's what I did, to keep me out of trouble. And so when I told him about the camera, I told him about the first picture. He said, oh, that's terrific. We'll bring, the head of the lab in to see it. I said, no, it's portable. Oh, really? I mean, that's how distant it was, That was fine with me because I never knew from one day to the next if the whole thing was going to blow up. I mean, so I didn't mind, my failure being private if it occurred, right? But that's kind of what motivated me, and that was the environment I was in. It was a very supportive environment. And so those first pictures then started creating a bit of a stir because we started showing it to managers throughout the company, and that, of course, was a whole nother interesting experience, well, for which I was totally unprepared for.